Good afternoon to our Premier and Ministers of Government, members of the media, listeners and viewers. Let me first wish you Good Friday greetings to all. As you know, it is no longer business as usual, so we have organized this virtual press conference because, as you are aware, a 7-day shutdown is among new government measures to contain the spread of COVID-19. This press conference will allow for more details to be provided to the public on what new arrangements will be made. As a reminder, this press conference is being conducted virtually. Officials and members of the media are participating remotely through a video conferencing software. The Premier, Honorable Joseph E. Farrell, will deliver some remarks, after which the press will be allowed to ask questions. We also have the Deputy Premier, Dr. the Honorable Samuel Joseph, online, Minister of Health, Honorable Charles T. Kernan, Minister of Agriculture, Honorable Cranston Buffong. Premier, please proceed with your remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. A blessed Good Friday to all of you, and happy Easter celebrations. I know we missed Mass and Good Friday services today, and we will also miss the celebration of Easter Sunday. As we are doing now with this press conference meeting virtually, so we will worship together on Easter Sunday, celebrating the risen Christ in our homes and in our hearts. These are not normal times across the world. And globally, countries are battling to control the dreaded secret enemy, COVID-19. The coronavirus poses two significant threats to our people. It poses a threat to the world economies. And secondly, it poses a more serious threat to the health of our peoples. In the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, it is projected that our economies will contract by some 4% during 2020. This is indeed worrying, especially in our small economies. But Montserrat, with its minute population, does not have the luxury of preparing for large-scale virus infections. And so that is why we are putting in place a number of measures to protect lives, to safeguard our citizens. Because the lives and health of our people is much more important than even our economy. Over the past month, government has taken steps to reduce the remission and spread of the virus. And as the number of cases increase, we promise that we'll further increase measures to break the chain and to protect our peoples. On March 20th, 2020, government introduced the measures, and after monitoring the situation and the adherence of these measures by some persons, we are left with no choice but to add new measures which are designed to halt the spread and to detect new cases within our population. The Ministry of Health is unable to undertake wide-scale testing at this time, and aware that not everyone carrying the virus exhibits symptoms. And here lies the danger. We have persons who are asymptomatic, are walking around affecting others, and soon we'll have a situation which might be unmanageable. To this end, Cabinet met yesterday and agreed on further measures to assist in curtailing COVID-19. These measures include an extension of the lockdown until April 30th, 2020. Within this period, there will be a 7-day lockdown where limited businesses and essential services will be available to the population. The new order provides for persons to leave home only for exercise from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Bearing in mind that exercise activities will be restricted to your environs. For example, if you're living in Lookout, you're only permitted to walk around Lookout and in groups no more than 4 members of your own family. During the 7-day lockdown, supermarkets, banks, and bakery, etc., will be closed. The only exception will doctor's office, pharmacy. These will be open from 8 to 6 p.m., from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and undertaker activities at 24 hours. The number of passes issued will be restricted. No vehicles will be allowed on the roads except for emergency purposes or those assigned essential services passes. Government must and will act decisively to control the virus and to protect the health of our people. After Cabinet met and agreed on the measures, a statement was released to alert the public. But recognizing that not much time would have been given for persons to purchase supplies for the week, a second order was prepared and issued to waive some of the activities under the existing order to provide for one member of each household to shop either on Saturday or Sunday of this week. That is tomorrow and Sunday. For this purpose, the island is divided into 4 alphabetical zones or areas, and persons based on their last name will shop according to the time allotted. Saturday, 11th April, from 8 a.m. to 12 o'clock noon. Alphabetical order A, B, C, D, E, and F. Persons with surname beginning with these letters will shop from 8 to 12. On Saturday, 11th April, from 1 to 5 p.m., persons with their surname beginning with G, H, I, J, K, and L will shop from 1 to 5 on Saturday. On Sunday, April 12th, from 8 to 12, persons with M, N, O, P, Q, and R will shop from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. And on Sunday afternoon, from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m., surnames beginning with S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z will shop. Persons will be shopping in groups for 4 slots, and you will not be allowed to shop outside of your alphabetical zone. The police will stop you and ask for ID. Banks. I recognize that banks are on short days, and because the notice came out late yesterday, banks were not prepared to open until maybe next week. During this day, I have been negotiating with the banks, trying to get an accommodation. And presently, Bank of Montserrat have agreed to open tomorrow morning from 9 to 12 only on Saturday. That's tomorrow, barring any legal obstacles. I made that clear. Bank of Montserrat have been committed to open tomorrow, Saturday, from 9 to 12, providing that there's no legal obstacles. And we are working through that as I speak. The credit union, on the other hand, will open tomorrow, Saturday, from 9 in the morning until 1 o'clock. These are the hours that we have for us under this second order. Let me speak briefly on what I term care and release package, because I realize that under the situation, the current situation, persons are facing difficulties. And if you had listened to my statement on Wednesday gone, I would have outlined some steps which my government has taken and is taking to alleviate the sufferings of our people. We have, in fact, begun to process some applications for persons in the tourism sector. We have begun to distribute food packages, and we are working on the third component of that package, of that stimulus package or care and relief package, to facilitate self-employed persons who can qualify for food package and also what we call COVID unemployment benefit. These are what I want to present to you in my brief statement. And we are now open as cabinet and ministers for your question. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll now begin with questions from the press, and just to establish the structure, we'll start with Radio Montserrat, then to Bennett Roach. Following that, we'll have Malika McKenzie, Vernier Bass, and Dwight Sampson. We also have Tanisha Christopher as part of the COVID-19 communication team, and she will be asking questions from our live stream. You know, as we know that the public, they have questions as well, and we want to ensure that persons are clear. So now I'll start with James White Jr. Your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Fiona, and I say good afternoon to the Honorable Premier and others on the panel, Deputy Premier, Dr. the Honorable Samuel Joseph, et al. Honorable Premier, let's just look at the whole situation where it is a health emergency, and we know, I'm putting on my disaster management hat here, we know that the health cannot operate in isolation. And we are looking at a coordinated effort to ensure that we have all the response agencies having a say or a part to play in the whole operation. I note that you mentioned the arrangement for people to go to the supermarkets and so on. Now, will somebody be policing or persons be policing the actual operations at the supermarket to ensure that people maintain the social distancing? That is my first question.
I'm sorry, Premier, your mic is off. Your mic is off, it seems. We're seeing that you're speaking, but we're not hearing you. Your mic seems to be off. Right. Premier, we're hoping...
Sorry, my mic was,
Yes, your
sorry.
mic was off.
Let me start over again.
Yes,
Thank you very
please.
much, Mr. White. Very good question. In the same order, number 25, I think, yes, we have embodied the Royal Montserrat Defence Force to add some assistance to the police service, because we recognize that there will be need for us to regularize and to control the crowds tomorrow and Sunday at all businesses, whether banks or supermarkets. And so, yes, police will be assigned, police and defense force officers will be assigned, at least I think we said 2 to each establishment, to ensure that they enforce social distancing and that the establishment follow the rules. So that is in order. In speaking to the banks, I also raised that matter. And we agreed that after this press conference, and once it's confirmed by the bank that all is well, I will be speaking to the Commissioner of Police to also give some assistance to the banks in maintaining social distancing and crowd control. So yes, we are very much controlled. On the other question, which you started off, your preamble, you started off by saying that the Ministry of Health cannot handle it alone, and we agree on that wholeheartedly. And that is why I think 2 weeks ago we have reacted or brought into force the national and advisory, the NDPRAC, to assist with that. And you have experience in disaster management. And I think Major Ryan is presently coordinating approach to involve other persons and entities into the mix, so that it's not cabinet, it's not just a few of us, it is all of us together. And Mr. Ryan is doing a very good job with his team to integrate and mobilize other persons into the mix.
Right, James?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Premier. Quickly.
Can I add to that, Mr. White?
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Joseph, yeah.
Because in terms of the social distancing at the places tomorrow, we have to realize that the reason why this is put in place is the reason we have this order is to have people to be separated. So we have to have a responsibility on ourselves also. So if you go tomorrow to a place and you're in the Montserrat phrase jamming up with one, or you have defeated the whole reason for the last 2 to 3 weeks of lockdown. So within ourselves as people, if you go to a place and there's too much people, you have to talk to the people around you. Everybody have to work together. Please separate by the 6 feet. Please try to stay in a line. Please understand that there is enough food in Montserrat to last for over 6 weeks. So it's not going to finish tomorrow on Sunday. So just take our time, go through the process, work with one another, work with the stores, separate ourselves, and don't remove the entire benefit of the last 2 weeks of what we did, and have some responsibility for our own health. Just to put that out there so that everything goes smoothly tomorrow and Sunday.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Premier. Okay, quickly, my other question is, there was this whole idea that the tourism sector would be first in terms of getting assistance or funding, as the case may be. Now, what is the criteria for determining that the tourism sector would be the first? Is there a criteria? Because I know that there are a number of people who are struggling. I've spoken to some of them, are struggling to make ends meet. And I would want to think that these vulnerable people would be the first to be receiving assistance. I know you spoke very briefly, Honorable Premier, of some aid packages, food packages, or whatever the term that is used. But there are a lot of other people out there who are actually struggling to make ends meet. So what is the criteria for determining who gets assistance first?
Thank you very much. That is a very good question, because persons are raising the same thing. Don't forget that we maintain our social services package. So persons who were already on social welfare have not been affected in any way, because they still receive, that month end gone, they receive their allowances, their package. So those persons who become vulnerable are already taken care of by the government social welfare scheme. A number of persons in the tourism sector would have prepared themselves to make some money during St. Patrick's, which was a major festival. And because of COVID, we had to turn back cruise ships. So the taxi drivers and the tour operators were not able to make any money within that period. So you realize why, and this in itself is a criteria, because they have lost out, because there was no activity to give them income. So once we turned back the cruise ship, the vessel from Guadeloupe would have been here with 400 persons. That was stopped. A number of cruise ships canceled and turned back. Secondly, a number of hotels and guest houses had reservations made. And because we had to abruptly end St. Patrick's Festival, cancellation was made to these reservations. So you understand that persons who are working in these sectors, in the tourism, in the hotels, in the guest houses, they abruptly lost income. And so it is critical that we provide them with some assistance first. Everyone who's out there who is in dire strait is going to be benefiting from the package. It's just that we have to deal with these people who fell off. For instance, the restaurants, for instance, St. Patrick's was a big thing for them. They have lost because we shut down the restaurants and guest houses and other things. And so they have not made any income and they have to maintain their staff. It is their staff that we are concerned about most because their staff, if they're not making income, they can't pay their staff. And if they can't pay the staff, then the staff will be going without money. So these are some of the criteria that we took into consideration when we're deciding that the first group of persons to benefit were persons in the tourism sector. I hope that answers your question.
All right, I'm getting the signal from James, yes. So we'll move on to Bennett Roach of the Montserrat Reporter. Your questions, please.
Thank you. I noticed the first question that I would have had is what has happened, and I'm to bring about this escalation in the measures that we're going to be facing in a couple of days. You somehow touched on that, but one of the things you said that struck me was that people are walking around with symptoms or who are infected. How do we know that? And that must have been one of the considerations for you to bring this new thing. How do we know that? Are we following any of the WHO suggestions as to how we should be going about handling this crisis?
Maybe I should ask the Ministry of Health staff to speak to that because they are familiar.
Okay, so we're standing by, right? Ministry of Health and Social Services.
Regarding the, I'm having a little trouble hearing, but there are people walking around.
We're not hearing you clearly. I'm hearing the voice of Dr. Dorothea Hazel Blake, Director of Primary Health Care. We're not hearing you very clearly. Try again. And while we wait for Dr. Blake, just a reminder to the press to turn their cameras on when they are asking questions and also to the officials when they're responding to those questions.
My video is telling me that the host has turned it off.
Okay,
So,
thank you. We'll adjust on our end. Thank you for alerting us to that. Dr. Blake, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's better now. Proceed.
Saying, I understood you was asking how can we be aware that people are walking the virus and spreading it.
Yeah.
The answer would be the person.
I'm sorry, that's not coming through very clear. In that room.
Yes, we're still, yeah, it started
some-
off okay that last time, but it has since deteriorated. So we're not hearing you clearly at all.
Sorry, I'm sitting in my office with my computer.
Maybe shift your position and see if that would help a bit.
The location is the room they're in, actually. Acoustics is terrible.
Okay.
Can we try with somebody else? I'll come back.
Okay, so yes, let's do that. So, Mr. Roach, Dr. Blake has indicated that she will respond to your question. She's just shifting her position. So I would suggest that you ask your second question in the meantime while we allow for that to be done, and then she'll respond to you following.
Yes, and then I can have some kind of follow-up. Dr. Sami touched on one of my biggest concerns with the whole management of this thing. And And the logistics are somewhat skewed and not clear to people. And I don't understand how it can function. Now, am I correct that there are some 30 people who are sent out, who are somewhere on quarantine? I shouldn't say somewhere, they're sent home to be in quarantine with their families?
Can you hear me now, please?
Yes,
I think, yeah,
you're much better now.
just a minute. I think the second question is also a health question.
Right, that is why I'm trying to answer now.
So, Dr. Blake, I'll allow you to proceed now.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
can answer the second question first. Yes, we have about 32 persons who we have asked who are in quarantine. A couple of those may actually be in isolation, and there is a difference, but that number is correct.
Yeah, but what I want to know is how are they handled? How are the quarantine, the people handled?
How are they handled?
Yes. So where are they? Where are the people who are in quarantine?
The persons who are in quarantine right now are in their homes. There might be one person who is hospitalized and I suppose can be considered quarantined as well. Each person who is identified as being in need of quarantine is assigned a case worker from within the Ministry of Health and Social Services. And that case worker interacts with their persons, for want of a better term, on a daily basis in some cases, or certainly every other day via telephone. Additionally, we have a visiting team consisting of one doctor and one nurse who will go and make home visits as necessary.
Isn't there a concern that if you put people who are suspected, whatever the level is, to be with their families, isn't that really increasing the risk of transmission?
Yes, that is a concern, and that is why we also have at our disposal some other facilities that if the risk assessment indicates that a particular individual needs to be removed from their house, we can actually have them relocated. And earlier in this outbreak, we have actually done that, where an individual was in a home setting and it was not deemed safe for the others, and that person was placed in what we want to call government quarantine facilities. But each case is assessed one by one, and sometimes it's not just that one individual, sometimes it's the whole household that is in quarantine, so there is no need to separate them. But where it is deemed necessary, we do have facilities at our disposal that we can move persons to.
So what you're suggesting to me by saying that a whole household could be in quarantine, the question is, how many households do we have quarantined then?
Mr. Roach, you would appreciate a household could be 2 people. So I have households of 2, and I have households of...
And so my question, my dear, is how many households? So
I'm just trying to get...
2, 3, 4, or whatever in a household. Is it 5 households comprising this?
All right, I understand the question, and I'm saying to you, I had counted them as individuals. If you give me a minute, I can get you the number of households by the time I get back around to you.
Okay. Dr. Blake, there was an earlier question posed regarding persons who are asymptomatic. I think that was Mr. Roach's first question. Do you want to address that now, or you'd come back to that?
He may need to ask the question again, please.
Yes. Mr. Roach, can you ask your first question, please, regarding, I think it was along the lines of evidence, what evidence does the Ministry of Health has pertaining to persons that are asymptomatic who may be transmitting the virus? That
drove the escalation.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
It came off the question, the statement the Premier made that people are walking around carrying the infection. How do we know that?
Okay, I understand the question.
That I think that it seems was the only reason why the escalation in the measures.
Okay, I'm going to let the Premier and his team answer as to why there was escalation in measures, but I can say that based on the assessment of those individuals who have actually been tested positive, when you analyze the risk factors for the persons, initially they could all be linked to, the first was a visitor, for example. The person had come to our shores from another country and had signs and symptoms, showed up at a health facility and was tested positive. Then subsequent persons who tested positive were clearly linked to persons who had visited us, or they themselves had visited other countries. But by the time we got a little bit further into the outbreak, we're seeing people now who have no discernible risk other than their day-to-day activities. So it is a safe assumption that that transmission, that catching of the virus, to put it in layman's terms, happened on island. Not any visitor who came in. So it is clear to assume, it is fair to assume, as the Premier said, that there are persons walking around, some of whom may be asymptomatic. And additionally, some of the ones that we've identified have showed up at the health center with very mild symptoms or with symptoms. So it is also true to say that there are people with symptoms walking around and there are persons without symptoms.
So maybe it's a little wrong to say that there are people walking rather than there may be people walking.
Mr. Roach,
that's of course, pardon me?
Thank you very much, Mr. Roach. I just wanted to allow others an opportunity to ask questions because
we have all night.
No.
What are you talking about?
And so
Don't
we're
we have
going
all
to,
night?
and we're going to ask that the media respectfully just as much as possible ask questions and not make statements, if at all possible. So Mr. Roach will proceed to the next media house and then you'll get another chance in the second round.
You see, listen to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roach. And now we'll move on to Malika McKenzie from Aliogana Express.
It's such a waste of time.
Thank you, Fiona. Am I being clear?
Yes, you are, Malika. Please proceed.
Okay. My first question, and this is from our frontline workers. What support will be given to frontline workers and their family, such as nurses, police, fire, defense force, who have to leave their families behind? And some of them are concerned that they will be working on Saturday and Sunday. Their families are not driving, and with the use of the alphabetical order to get their grocery, if there's some way that they can have packages delivered to them, care packages deliver also to them.
Thank you for your question, Malika. We're waiting for a response.
Maybe I should take that. Malika, thank you, didn't say exactly who. But before I answer Malika's question, I just want to clarify something that Mr. Roach said. What I said was, and I want to be clear on it, the Ministry of Health is unable to undertake widespread testing at this time. And we are unable, and we are aware that not everyone carrying the virus exhibits symptoms. And here lies the problem. We are persons who are asymptomatic and are walking around infecting other persons. So I didn't say clearly that they are, but as a result of us not being able to, I just want to clarify that. On to Malika's question. We have a system set up, Malika, where if persons are in need of assistance, they can do two things. They can make their request, they can make their order from the supermarket and notify the Red Cross. and they will pick up and drop off the supplies and collect the cash and take it back to the supermarket. If you're working on Saturday or Sunday and you need to shop and you can't make it, just call the supermarket, make your order, notify the Red Cross, and they will go and pick your supplies up, take it to your home, and collect the cash and take it back to the market. That is in place about 2 weeks now, because we recognize that there are persons who not only who are working, but vulnerable persons and persons who do not want to leave home, and they need this service. So that service is in fact available.
Thank you, Premier. Malaika, back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Premier. Now, this question is from our persons, the farmers for animals. The question is asked, how do they deal with that? Because they do not want to get into entanglement with the law if they have to go and tend to the animals. And the animals are not just in one place, they're in different places.
Assuming that I can answer that one. Good afternoon, Malika. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone else. Provisions were made for our farmers and our animal farmers to take care of the animals during the process. We cannot afford to let our animals die, so therefore we will be allowing people to look after their animals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malaika, for your two questions. We'll now proceed to Vania Bass for her two.
Am I on?
Yes, you are, Vania. So you can proceed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Vania Bass from 664 Connect. Does the government have any plans in place to discuss the psychological and mental health implications of COVID-19 and the lockdowns on monstrations? Are you monitoring how citizens are coping during this crisis? And are there any possible methods of intervention when these issues start to present themselves? Did you hear me?
Yes.
The Minister of Health is with us. I think he something that we have considered. The Minister of Health will deal with that.
On that matter, it's a matter that has come up time and time again. And what we have in place, there's clinical psychologists who will start some programs on Radio Montserrat. Secondly, I don't have the number, but if you call, we're trying to set up a hotline that you can call if you're depressed or so they can speak to you. So we in fact have been talking about the mental health. And hence one of the reasons that we insist on ensuring that people can still take their little walks and exercise rather than be cooped up all day and all night.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, in order for someone to be tested, it's been widely stated that you have to show symptoms of the virus. Nevertheless, it's also been noted that some persons are COVID-19 positive, even though they're not showing symptoms. Is there a maximum number of tests that we can send to CARFA? And if not, do we have the option to carry out rapid tests, as it may be more cost effective and efficient for everyone on island to be tested?
Okay, let me answer what part of that question I can. In terms of the testing, the first protocol we were following from CARFA was indeed for persons who are symptomatic. That means you must have signs and symptoms. That protocol has been adjusted, and it now makes allowances for close contacts. So if I tested positive and you're a close contact, one of my close contacts, whether or not you have signs and symptoms, you will be tested. The Ministry of Health, however, has put forward our proposal for going forward as soon as we have testing capacity on island. And you may have heard that we've been through our colleagues at Public Health England and other agencies, we have been sourcing the machinery, equipment, and the various paraphernalia that is required to be brought on island as soon as possible. And once we do have that capacity on island, then the testing protocol will certainly change. You mentioned rapid testing. I will tell you, I'm not a fan of rapid testing, neither is most of us in the ministry, because rapid testing only detects antibodies. And at this point, it would be better if we could do the PCR testing, which is what we await. That is the type of equipment that we have assurances from our colleagues that we will have on the ground. And the training, I'm told, will be done virtually. So as soon as possible, we will, in fact, be able to do our own testing. But in terms of how many samples we have we can send to CARPHA, we can send up to 20 samples at any one time. Or 20 samples in a week.
Okay, thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Vernier. We'll move on now to the next media host, Dwight Sampson, DS Media. While we wait for Dwight, just to remind the officials, when you're responding, as much as possible, please turn your cameras on. Good afternoon, Dwight. Please proceed with your questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Resurrection Weekend to all. Premier question for you, very short question. Are allocations made for the Seventh Adventist community whose surname ends in letters allocated to shop on Saturday? Are any allocations made for those individuals?
It has been discussed, and we are made to understand that we respect individuals' religious affiliation and beliefs, and we have no intention to exploit or to deprive them of that. We understand, though, that in situations like these, sometimes compromises, and I'm not saying that they have to make compromises, but I understand. I've worked with my fellow Christians in the Adventist Brotherhood, and I know that they have ways and means of getting goods without passing cash. And I know that happens because I have had opportunities previous years to deal with Adventists who actually collected things but don't pay on that day. So I'm not saying that we're not deliberate in doing it. We want to respect people's religious belief, and we will. I respect mine and I respect others. But in times like these, there might be room for some compromise on behalf of all of us. And it's not something that the government wanted to impose on people's belief. But unfortunately, at this time, they may have to just ask them to bear with us and accept what we are doing and see how best they can work their way through it.
Okay, Dwight, do you have another question?
Thank you, Fiona. Dr. Blake and Minister Kernan, question for you. From the pool of 8 laboratory confirmed cases of COVID in Montserrat, has there been any testing of any of the confirmed cases, in particular patient 0?
Could you repeat the question, please?
My apologies. From the pool of the 8 laboratory confirmed cases of COVID on Montserrat, has there been any retesting of any of the patients, and especially patient 0 to patient 5?
Okay, Mr. Thank you for your question. Your numbering is different to mine, but let me put it this way. The protocol, when persons test positive for COVID-19, is that approximately 14 days after the initial test, a repeat test is done. And the idea then is to test if the person is now negative. If they test negative on the second test, which is 14 days from the first, as I indicated, then that's good news. It means that their body is clearing the virus. The protocol then requires an additional negative test, which can be taken anytime from 24 hours after test number 2 to a couple of days. And so we test them a third time. If you have 2 negative tests, then the person is considered to have recovered from their COVID-19 infection. If they test positive the second time around, then clearly they're not clearing the virus from their system. And so you wait a further 7 days and you do another test. And that process continues until the individual tests negative in 2 consecutive tests. Now, in the interest of patients' confidentiality, I'm not going to tell you whether I've tested patients 0 to 5, as you call them. What I will say to you is that of all the patients we have indeed tested them as they approach the 14th, either on the 14th day or shortly thereafter. And we will continue to follow that protocol as I described and leave it there.
Fiona, may I ask a follow-up question, please?
Yes, you may. Please proceed.
Okay, so Dr. Blake, follow-up question. You said that within the 14-day period after the confirmation of their first test positive, if the person is tested negative the first time, does that person remain in quarantine, or are they allowed to go out, go back to their individual home, socialize within family circles, etc.?
No, they're not. The first test is not the clearance, that is not what's needed for clearance. You must have 2 consecutive negative tests. So that individual is still required to remain in isolation within wherever they will be isolated before. What we try to do is to have the second and the third test as close together as possible, because you'd appreciate having been in isolation for 14 days already. And I'm told that my second test is now negative. I'm anxious to get on with my life, but they have asked to remain in isolation until the third test results are back, and we then have 2 negative tests.
Okay, thank you.
So just quick question. So how long is that time frame from the first, second, and third case? Is it the same 14-day span?
From the first to the second test, it's 14 days.
No, I'm talking about the second. Okay, after you confirm positive, the next
between the
test, the first negative. What's the span between the first negative to the third negative?
I spoke of 2 negative tests. The time span between the first and the second can be 24 hours or up to 4 days. Okay. One of the challenges we have, again, is that we do not test right here on island. Mm-hmm. So it may be 24 hours, but most than likely it can be up to 48 hours, up to 3 days. But we do them as soon as it is humanly possible. And so that we do not ask people to stay isolated any longer than necessary. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Blake. Thank you so much, Fiona.
Thank you. And we'll now have questions from Tanisha Christopher, member of our communications team. And as I said, she was gathering some questions there from our live stream on YouTube, and she'll be asking some of the questions here. Tanisha, over to you.
Thank you, Fiona. Now, we have a number of questions coming from the public on both the YouTube channel and on Facebook, and we will try our best to have all your questions answered. So I'll start with the first one, and it's from YouTube. The question is, and this is for the Premier, is anything being put in place to ensure that people do not bulk buy and shorten supplies for others, so that by the time Group 4 gets to purchase items, there will be a range of items still available in the stores?
Could you just repeat the question again?
Okay, the question is asking if anything is being put in place to ensure that people do not bulk buy and shorten supplies for others, so that the time Group 4 gets to purchase items in the supermarkets, there will be a range of items still available.
Thank you, Tanisha. The question, the order does make provision for the proprietors to control how much people can buy. But I don't want to create a fear in the minds of people that there is a shortage of supplies. And my colleague, Dr. Samuel would have said it early on. There's adequate supply of stuff on Montserrat, and that is why. Notice we have given an hour between the first group of persons from 8 to 12, and they have left an hour where shelves can be restocked in order to make a provision for the next group of persons coming in. so that you don't come in at 12 o'clock. The proprietor would assess the shelves and repack the shelves because there's adequate supply. As a matter of fact, containers came in yesterday. Containers coming in on, we have supplies on island. And I don't know if my colleague, Dr. Sami, want to take up on this.
Yeah, because the trade department under the Ministry of Finance continuously runs and sends surveys to different shops to ask them what your supplies are. So constant monitoring is done of the supplies on island. And from the last report and from what we know, containers came yesterday. Containers came from some of the proprietors last week, and we know containers are coming for some of the proprietors this week, the week upcoming. So we know there's at least 6 weeks supply on island. So we don't foresee that in 2 days, people are shopping for 1 week and buy out 6 weeks worth of supply. So just asking people, remember you're shopping for 1 week in this first instance. Be mindful of what other people are doing. And as the Premier mentioned, it's also up to the proprietors. They realize that people, for whatever reason, are choosing to go to a specific item and they're running out, to put their measures in place to manage that. But they are, from the last trade report and from what we know, there are supplies on the island for 6 weeks. So we don't foresee that people will be able to shop it out in 2 days.
Thank you for that response. This question is for the health team. Will masks or some form of face cover be mandatory for people visiting the banks and supermarkets? And if not, why?
So we are waiting a response from the health team. So that's either Dr. Dorothea Hazel Blake or the Minister of Health. And just a reminder to turn your cameras on when responding.
I'm sorry, regarding my camera, just to say I can't turn it on for several reasons, but one of which, once we do that, then you probably won't be able to hear me.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that explanation.
And there is no, as far as I know, maybe, and somebody from the actual cabinet may need to speak to that, but there is no policy as yet that says that persons who are out in public need to wear a mask. I know if you listen to the media, you will hear different things depending on what country you are in. They have some countries that are mandating masks and some are saying that it is up to the individual. I do believe that a decision regarding that is pending, but as of now, the Ministry of Health is not recommending that just now. In terms of the why, if we maintain the social distancing that the guidelines are asking us to do, if we maintain at least the 6 foot distance, then most of us only need to wear a mask in certain circumstances. So what I would recommend, for instance, you go to the supermarket and the cashiers, I believe, need to be wearing masks because it is not quite possible just yet to pay for your goods standing at a counter 6 feet away from the cashier. So there are certain people. I was coming down the road, the police stopped me a while ago and the police officers were wearing their masks. Again, they came right up to my vehicle to see it was me. So again, if you're making that closer contact, then you do need to be wearing masks. So right now, the masks that we have are for the frontline workers, the police, the fire and rescue, and I know I'm going to get into trouble because I'm going to forget some of them. Certainly the healthcare workers need to be wearing masks, and we have issued masks to them. Members of the public, not right now, but the frontline workers, as I said, I would strongly recommend cashiers, bank tellers, anybody who's up close, and it's not possible to transact your business from a distance, then you should be wearing a mask.
Anisha.
Thank you, Dr. Hazel Blake, for that response. And we have one more question during this round, and the person is asking about garbage collection. Would that still be operational during the 7-day lockdown? So this again is for the health team. I'm assuming the minister can respond.
Tanisha, can you please repeat your question while we wait for a response from the health team?
Okay, the question is, would garbage collection still be operational during the 7-day lockdown?
We are standing by for a response to a question regarding garbage collection and whether or not that will be allowed during the 7-day lockdown commencing Monday, April 13 at 12 a.m.
I don't know what is happening to the minister. I I don't I don't know what's happening to the minister, but if you don't mind, maybe I can respond to this question.
Yes, please proceed.
Certainly, garbage collection cannot be allowed to pile up. Garbage cannot be allowed to pile up. So clearly, as part of the essential services, garbage collection will be one of those areas, because we don't want to compound the issue of having more infestation of other types of disease around. Clearly, yes, it is in fact part of one of the essential services that we will allow to operate during the 7-day lockdown.
Okay, thank you so much for that response, Premier. And as is customary, we'll have the last round of questioning now, going back to James White Jr., Radio Montserrat, for his last 2 questions.
Thank you very much, V. And I note that the Honorable Premier would have mentioned morticians, undertakers, and pharmacies. Now, for clarification, we are looking at entities like Radio Montserrat, for instance. Will Radio Montserrat be off air? No, we also have emergencies within that particular situation. The time frame that you would have given, the 7-day time frame, you would have emergencies within that particular time. What about MUL? Somebody mentioned, asked a question earlier, which Tanisha asked. Please, for clarity, could you explain to us again who are considered essential services or essential workers within that total shutdown? And you mentioned about passes or something like that. So do we need passes if we are to be operating in that particular period?
Thank you, Mr. White. I think it's important that people give clarity. And
We're not hearing the Premier at the moment, so we're just troubleshooting to see what transpired there, but we are not able to hear the Premier.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I think I'm on now. Sorry.
Yes, you are.
There are some essential services that will continue to operate. What we're doing under this 7-day lockdown is to control the number of persons who pose to be essential services. Clearly, we will analyze those services. Clearly, MUL will be on call, blackouts and other things. Clearly, where the Montserrat is a communication, where the Montserrat is not affected, So there are areas of services that will be available. The police, for instance, the fire service, the hospital, some aspect of the airport, for medevacs and that kind of thing. They all spells those things out. So let's not get worried over what. We will continue to operate as normal as we can, but with some tightening, because we just cannot allow everybody to roam the street under this guise of emergence of the essential services or essential businesses. We will be defeating the purpose for which we are having this lockdown. The sole purpose is to minimize the risk, to reduce contacts, and to reduce the spread and emission of COVID. And so we will have to control the number of persons who are out there who are mingling with each other. But I don't think the public should be worried about some services. There won't be a blanket essential service list. It won't happen. But it will be controlled. And I said, they will call out someone call, for instance, a plumber may be called out on call to fix somebody's facility in the house. These are considerations that we have taken into consideration. And so don't worry, we are taking care and ensuring that business runs, but not as usual.
Mr. Premier, just a follow-up to that. The reason why I asked for clarity on that particular essential services, essential workers list, because we have workers who will be stopped by the police and, for instance, they're experiencing difficulties. That happened just a while ago with one of our workers. So the reason why I asked the question is for everybody to understand who is considered an essential worker or an essential service. So now that we've heard you with that, now we have a better appreciation for what is expected.
Let me just clarify this a little though. Management must make sure that the staff who are working on duty have some pass or permit or ID. You cannot allow everybody to say, I am working. Management must put in place some measure where the police service understand, police service know exactly who is working. So send a list of your workers and maybe a time schedule to the police so that they will not stop the workers. If you don't do that, all of us are entitled, all of us are subjected to stop and question. And nothing is wrong. The police meeting you on the road and ask you where you're going to, and you simply saying, I'm going to do a broadcast, I'm going to do something, a press conference, and I'm certain that they will use their judgment and let you through. But we don't want anybody to pose on these guys of essential services while going about doing their own business and making people.
Okay, Mr. Premier, my final question, and I believe that the Minister of Health or Dr. Hazel Blake could come in if possible. Now, we heard Governor Andrew Pierce saying that we're expecting some medical supplies, test kits, masks, whatever else from the UK. And if my memory serves me correctly, he would have said by today or early next week. What is the situation? What can you tell us about that? Because clearly, if we are going to control the spread of COVID-19, we would need to carry out the necessary tests, as the case may be. So what can you tell us about that situation? Are we still on target for those medical supplies from the UK? Just speak to us on that.
Is Minister Cronin, are you online? Okay, he seems to be having problems with his connection, so I will attempt to give an answer. The information available to me is that the equipment and the supplies have been shipped, but they're certainly not here yet. We're still expecting them sometime during the upcoming week. But honestly, that is as much as I can answer at this point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, may I add on something?
Yes, yes, you may. So we have Premier coming in as well.
The last communication, and I don't really minister what happened to the minister's system, and I'm not pretending to speak for the minister in any way. I'm not pretending to speak for the minister in any way, but of course, I don't understand what's going on. The latest information I have is that some equipment, some supplies have been purchased by Crown Agent. There is the I don't call it difficulty, but shipping is going to be a problem because we understand that most airlines have grounded their fleet, and as a result of that, shipping out of the UK could be a problem. But we expect to have some basic equipment. Let me make it clear that the testing machine is not going to be in the first batch. That is clear. Neither the testing kits will not be in the first batch. So I don't want to raise expectations anyway. We're getting some PPEs, I think, in that first batch. The second batch has been looked at to include the machine. But in the meantime, to bring some comfort to the population, and Dr. Blake alluded to it early on, we are working on all fronts to see how we can have the machine on island. But we are working with every possible source because having that machine on island is absolutely critical for us to do a wider test of the population to determine who is who. Right. So that's where we are. The first batch should be here. I understand. It wants to be here by the end of this week. It's not going to come the end of this today. It should be here next week, as far as I understand, providing they can find shipping, some facility to ship it, the aircraft or whatever.
Okay, thank you very much, Premier. We'll now move on to Mr. Bennett Roach, Montserrat reporter, for his questions, please. And we're seeing him there. Mr. Roach, can you hear us? Just a reminder to turn your cameras on when asking your questions and ensure that your mic is also on.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I am.
Good, because I'm not, I keep getting on mute, muted, and etc., and video turned off and so on. Okay, I still haven't had an answer to the first question I'd asked regarding the, no, I missed the question too. But the first question that Dr. Blake was going to come back to me and give me some response to that. Is she ready with that yet?
Is that the first question regarding persons who are asymptomatic and the evidence that the Ministry of Health would have?
No.
Well,
it had to. I made reference to Dr. Sami, who came in and answered, assisted in answering one of the questions where he talked about, he there and then explained certain things to people. I've got about half a dozen questions from people. One of the questions, anyhow, let me ask this one: is if the answer is not isn't forthcoming from the first question. Do we have an improvement in the stock of kits for testing purposes?
Mr. Roach, the stock of kits, I'm not sure I'm understanding. You mean the samples are being sent to the Caribbean Public Health Agency's laboratory in So no, we do not have test kits at the moment on island.
So I'll just read you this question that I have, that I received. How many kits do they have in stock presently? It's a key question.
And I think the kits, maybe I'm not understanding the term kits, but I'm saying to you, we do not have test kits on island at the moment. What we do is they take a sample, a swab from the nasal cavity of the person who is suspected of being infected, and that swab is sent to the Trinidad, to the Caribbean Public Health Laboratory, where they have test kits, and that's where the tests are conducted.
There are concerns about, I mentioned about the logistics earlier, and there are concerns about people as to where they are able to go and shop when their slot comes up. Is there any control over that, or can people from Old Town go to Aravins and shop during their time? How is that going to be conducted?
I could deal with that.
Yes, Dr. Sami, we're hearing you. Dr. Joseph, we're hearing you. So yes, you may.
Yeah, let's not try. The object of this is trying not to be too legalistic with our interpretations. Remember that the reason why we are doing these procedures is to try to limit social gathering and try to limit people moving apart. So let's keep that in mind. All the laws, all the different rules, all this other stuff is to try to keep people apart. So we know that when all the other islands institute lockdowns, and we've seen from experience that there's a rush to everybody to the store. And different people have tried different methods of trying to manage it. because people are going to go out and people are going to try to get stuff, and people do need stuff to put in. But you also need to have a way to separate the crowds. So the system that we came up with was the alphabetical system to split it into 4. It is not for people to break the rules and to break the law, but it's to try to get people, let's try to do this in an orderly way. Even though your name is in the morning, try to do your best to come in the morning, line up, get your supplies. If your name is in the afternoon, try to come in the afternoon and get your supplies. Nobody is out to kill anybody and to make sure, oh, well, we said this, therefore you can't get your goods, therefore you can't do this. It's just for us as a community to understand, let us try our best to minimize the contact in the pre-up, whatever you call it, the part before the lockdown. Get your stuff in order, separate. There is enough time for everybody to get everything, so there's no need to panic, there's no need to rush. So it's just to try to get people to go orderly. So yes, there's going to be edge cases and people that missed their thing and should have come in the morning but didn't come. And I'm not encouraging people to do that, but I'm just saying let's try and keep within the rules. Let's try and remember why these things were put into place so that everybody can get their things. We can all have a good 7 days and come out of it better than how we went in.
I ask how many positive cases we have at the moment? Confirmed cases.
At the moment, we have 8 persons on Montserrat who have been confirmed with COVID-19 infection.
But
8.
How many are hospitalized?
At the moment, we have 1 person in hospital who is confirmed.
And of the 8 persons of the other 7 now, are they on quarantine someplace as well? Are they among the 30?
As I tried to explain earlier, the quarantine and isolation are all on the same list. So yes, as long as they have tested positive, they are in isolation. They're not allowed to mix with the rest of the population.
Okay, we brought in a third word there. So isolation is grouped with the quarantine. That's what
I said at the very beginning, Mr. Roach. Listen, there are 2 things. If you are in isolation, it is because you have been confirmed with the condition, whatever condition it happens to be. This time we're speaking about COVID-19. If you are a contact of that individual or deemed to be at high risk, you are placed in what's called quarantine because you do not yet have any signs or symptoms or have not yet been tested positive. So within the same house, you can have somebody in isolation and then the resident of that house would now be in quarantine because they have not yet demonstrated any signs or symptoms or they are still testing negative.
And my final thoughts on this whole thing is anything being done to escalate how we inform and educate. Let me use that word, educate. People don't like it, but let me use that word, educate the people. You mentioned to me earlier about people going to the quarantine homes, etc., and so on. But what about the general public? Like, people can be infecting people by just going to the supermarkets, going into the supermarkets and coming out. Is there anything to really tell people? This has been thrown on all of us, very certainly, but there's some people who are not coping very well, and they are going to get into trouble because they may not understand something that they should be doing. What are we doing about escalating the education of people to understand what this thing is truly, truly about?
Well, in terms of escalating, I'm sure there's always an opportunity to escalate, but since January of this year, we have been using various forms of media to inform the public. We have been on air, we have created flyers and leaflets. We have gone, when I say we, members of the health team and our other stakeholders, we have gone to groups, we have gone to churches, we have gone to schools, we have sent messages around to workplaces, and the work continues. But I take your point. I'm sure that it can be escalated and needs to continue to do so. But I assure you that the message is constantly there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hazel Blake, and thank you, Mr. Roach. We're now moving on to Malika McKenzie of Aliogana Express.
Thank you, Fiona. My first question, what level of new cases is the government willing to accept before it considers the country safe to open? Countries like China and Hong Kong, which started in January with the crisis, are now trying to open and are still seeing new cases weekly. To this point, what are our parameters for success, considering that experts are saying we are likely to see new cases all year? And how do the current level of escalation in Montserrat compare to the risk level of dying from the flu?
Okay, and that's...
I can answer the second part. I can answer the second part, and Premier or somebody else will have to answer the rest. Premier, I'll let you go first.
Let me do the first. Sorry. Let me do the first part of it. We are aware that we have to balance. We have two components working with. One is the health of our people, and two, to protect our economy. And you know right away which comes first. Protection of our population, the health of our population comes first. We have asked, Cabinet asked the health team last week to give us some projection as to forecasting in terms of the number of cases that we expect and that other thing. And that will give some indication as to how we can plan to get out of a post-COVID era. And we have to start thinking about that. And so we've asked the health team to give us some indication as to what they think will happen and what the best case scenario in terms of number of cases. To be honest, your first question is 0. We don't want any cases. And I'm not sure that you could wait that long. But we have to make sure we're in a position not to expose a greater percentage of our population to COVID. So we're not going to run the risk to open up because the economy is suffering. We have to make sure that whatever we do is going to protect the lives of the individuals and to reduce the health risk in Montserrat. That's basically the first part of your question. And Mrs. Blake, Dr. Blake?
One of the things that we noticed is that whereas some countries have doubling of their number of new cases in a day or 2 days, we are not seeing that doubling effect in our population, which is why I support the government's position in extending the lockdown, if that's the correct term, because it means that we have a slower rate of infection and we're trying to keep it that way. The other thing that gives me hope is that the persons were presenting at health centers and they were presenting with very clear symptoms which could be associated with COVID-19, which is why we have tested approximately 40 people to date. But in the last couple of days, that number has also gone down. So whereas when we opened the clinic first, you had 20, 25 people per day showing up, many of whom did not turn out to be COVID, which is great, but had flu-like symptoms, so they were sufficiently concerned, so they came forward. By the time we got to this week, that number is considerably reduced. So we're not having as many people around with flu-like symptoms. And now before you all start shouting that, oh, but there are people who are not symptomatic, if we maintain the lockdown, then it will give the people who are symptomatic an opportunity to stay home and to go through that whole period of being sick without symptoms, to put it that way. So by the time that we lift the lockdown, they would have shed the virus, would have been shed from their bodies, and then they will no longer be able to transmit. So it's not an exact science, but it is an opportunity for us to use what we have at our disposal, which is the social distancing, the lockdown, the separation of people, and that will indeed reduce the likelihood of the spread.
Thank you. But Premier, 0 is an unrealistic number. So can we come to a number that maybe is acceptable?
Government is not in a position to answer the question now. They're still in early days. We've had our first case in March 17th. This is now April 8th. 8th? Yeah, 8th or 9th. And so we're not in a position to say precisely we will open up on a certain date. We will consult with the health officials, we will look at the science, and we will guide it guided by that. And down the road, we will be able to say, we are planning for a 3-month cycle right now. That's where we are. Our plans are for 3 months in the first instance. And anything can happen within that month. We can have escalation, we can have de-escalation. We don't know, but we are planning for 3 months. And we'll monitor the situation within this cycle.
Thank you. My next question, and it's kind of a follow-up, because in the earliest you talked about giving the tourism sector monies, but then we have persons who are self-employed, persons like construction workers, yard maintenance people and such. How would they be assisted?
I went through that length on Wednesday, and I would encourage you to be pressed to listen to my Wednesday message, because I basically bring you up to date with what we're doing. I outlined 3 components in what we term phase 1 of the relief and assistance and relief for workers. And to answer your question, the 3rd component within that phase 1 is targeting self-employed persons. And what we are doing is that they are entitled to a food package equivalent to a certain dollar value, and also a cash value, actual cash. So the self-employed persons are taken care of in that phase, in that first phase, the 3rd component of our package.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Malaika, as well. We'll now proceed to Vernia Bass, 664 Connects.
Okay, my next question is, in SRR 24 of 2020, you have clarified the surnames and times that persons can go shopping, but you have not confirmed the zones. Can you please explain how the zones work? And if persons go shopping, do they need to walk with ID? And will the Defence Force maintain a list of the persons who have already been out?
Could you repeat your question, Ms. Bass?
So in SRO 24 of 2020, you have clarified the surnames and times that persons can go shopping, but you haven't confirmed the zones. Can you please explain how the zones work? And if persons go shopping, are they required to carry an ID? And will there be a list maintained by the Defence Force to verify who's already been out?
Yes, you are asked to carry your ID. That's number 1. And that is clear, because if you're talking about surname and political groupings, clearly you have to have your ID. And if you come to the checkpoint at 1 o'clock on Saturday morning, and your ID and your surname doesn't begin with F, they will turn you back. If you come to this checkpoint on Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock, and your surname does not begin or end with L, begin with G and end with L, you'll be turned back. So clearly, your ID will be critical. There's no zoning, and that came up about zoning. This alphabetically is not really zoning, because zoning, you want to be saying to us, you can only shop in Salem, which was a thought, to be honest. But you are free to shop, because the discussion came up, and the question is, what if I want something at a certain establishment, central market, and it's not there? So you must be given the attitude to move and buy it someplace else. So yes, there's not a zone per se in terms of where you can shop. The thing about your zone in terms of your alphabetic, your surname, and the time that you can shop within a certain timeline.
Okay, thank you very much. So my final question is, when making decisions that affect the entire population at a cabinet level, are you consulting or taking into consideration the other agencies that operate outside of the government? For example, you've called a complete lockdown of the island on a bank holiday in an island that still relies heavily on cash transactions and only has one cash machine. Now that you've been forced to negotiate with the banks after the fact, how will you remedy the situation going forward?
Renier, can you repeat that question, please?
When making decisions that affect the entire population at the cabinet level, are you consulting or taking into consideration the other agencies that operate outside of the government? For example, you have called a complete lockdown of the island on a bank holiday, on an island that still relies heavily on cash transactions and also an island with one cash machine. Now you've been forced to negotiate with the banks after the fact. How would you manage this going forward so that this doesn't continue to arise?
Thank you very much. This is not a compromise. We will listen. And there are times when decisions must be made. And government sometimes must be decisive. And this is one situation in which government will be decisive in terms of making decisions to protect its individuals. There are times when government will have to talk and negotiate, but some things are not negotiable when it comes to people's health. And so yes, we close. In any case, the banks would have been closed today, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. But recognizing that there's additional days beyond that, we have gone back. And the question is whether we should have made the announcement a day earlier. We didn't. And so to facilitate those persons who do not have ATM cards and carry the machine, we have negotiated. This is not a fallback. This is not a compromise. Just we understand as cabinet that there are persons who might be affected at this point in time. Although persons when you lock down before. So not. I hear the argument, and we have gone ahead and make amends. Next time around, yes, we will consider that kind of thing. But it's not that we're going to. The cabinet cannot depend and listen to every voice out there in order to make a decision, or else you will not make decisions.
Just as a quick follow-up to that, I'm just saying that it would be useful to have these agencies involved in those conversations up front, because in a recent interview that I did with the Deputy Premier as well, there was a question around these the tourism package that you're releasing, where people are expected to, where the bank's supposed to pay into their accounts. One, there's people who may not have bank accounts, and two, sometimes the recommendations that you're putting out doesn't match the recommendations that the bank's putting out. So for example, the Bank of Montserrat saying it's only operating 2 days a week doesn't really work out for people who now need to access those funds in order to be able to buy the same groceries that we're now giving permission to go out and buy on a Saturday and Sunday. So I'm just saying, like, going forward, it would be really helpful if at the cabinet level, before you come out and implement these recommendations, that you really consider the other agencies that also play a role in those decisions being implemented. Because as a media house, I'm receiving loads of questions that I can't answer, and it makes it really difficult. So spirit and consideration, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Vernier. We'll now move on to Dwight Sampson, DS Media, for your final questions.
Okay, good afternoon once again. Thank you so much, Fiona. Premier, I want to ask, for the sake of clarity, during Saturday and Sunday, are all businesses permitted to open, or just specifically supermarkets and hardware stores, as was previously indicated in the press release?
The new order comes into force at midnight on Sunday or Monday morning, 12 o'clock, carry on the play. It means that, for instance, tomorrow, I am of the view that things like Lime and DJCL can open. Because there is the only difference with tomorrow is that we have not allowed everybody to come at one time to shop. That's the only difference that changed. So markets would have been open in any case tomorrow. and maybe Sunday as they choose. Although some supermarkets don't open on Sunday, but some do. But it would have been open in any case. What we did, the only alteration we did was to put the shopping, put the people who are shopping in time slots and have names to avoid overcrowding. And that's, again, it's one of the major things that we have to do to encourage social distancing. We could have said, okay, everybody can shop Saturday and Sunday, but you'll have the whole of Montserrat coming out at the same time, and crowd management and that sort of thing would not have been possible. So yes, the only difference is that we have put them into groups and timelines. But the other businesses that are accustomed to open up until yesterday continue to do so until Sunday night, Monday morning.
Okay, so can I ask a follow-up question, Fiona, to that question?
Yes, please proceed.
So, Premier, what would prevent large lines at, let's say, Flow or Digicel? Because of course these services were closed for an extended period of time. I would want to think that persons still would want to pay their bills and get whatever accessories or so from these stores. So what would prevent long lines from being gathered at those places?
I stand corrected, but I'm not sure. I think the order number 19 or 22 would have allowed things like Digicel to open. I'm very surprised. Like when after DJ closed, I'm certain that that Flow opened for 2 days a week, if I'm not mistaken, and they chose to regulate their times of opening. And I'm sure that they opened, but Digicel on the other hand did not open for whatever reason I don't know, because under the order 22, they are considered as what we call it, communication services. Yes, and there's nothing which hindered them from opening within the last couple of weeks. But as of Monday, from 12:01 thereabout in the morning, they will not be able to open. But presently, I don't think there's anything that restricts those companies from open. And thank you for reminding me to tell the public that the hardware business will be open tomorrow morning, I think from 9 to a certain time, to facilitate persons who are in the trade who may want to get some material to occupy themselves while they're at home during the lockdown. Yes, so the hardware stores will be open, and that's a new event because they won't open during the previous week or so. But they will be open tomorrow only for to allow you to buy things don't buy yourself at home.
Okay, thank you so much, Premier Farrell. Question to Minister Kernan or Dr. Blake. I believe it was Dr. Blake somewhere earlier in the press conference would have indicated that we are at the community transmission stage of the virus. Can you see, Dr. Blake or Minister Kernan, how many local cases does Montserrat have at this time versus imported cases of the virus?
Okay, out of the 8 cases that I spoke about earlier, 6 of them are residents, as opposed to, I would use that term rather than local cases, because the majority of them, as I said, would have been transmitted on island. Does that answer your question?
Okay, can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so you said that six persons are currently on island. I'm asking this question based on the indications that have been coming out from the government of Antigua and Barbuda that the reason why they are having community transmission, based on what they would have said, is because of persons who have traveled from Antigua to Montserrat during the St. Patrick's Festival and would have contracted the virus while on island and then travel back to Antigua and would have interacted with the community. Can our health official of or a health official deny this, or can they say that this is a fact based on the assumptions being made by the Antiguan health officials?
First of all, let me correct something you said at the beginning. I said 6 of the persons are residents. Not that 6 are on island, there 8 on island, just so that we're clear. Now that when I'm making a distinction between resident and visitor. So just to clarify that. Now, secondly, regarding what the Antiguan authorities may not have said, I can only assume that they would have done their own contact tracing and their epidemiological investigations. So I am not going to be able to comment on the veracity of their statement one way or the other. What I do know is that by our own experience, some of the individuals who came on island would have arrived here in anticipation of St. Patrick's celebrations. And it is quite clear to me that some of those persons were in fact the links to our local cases. So it is not outside the realm of possibility that a similar thing happened in Antigua. Because we do know that quite a few people came to Montserrat from Antigua over that initial period before the activities were suspended or canceled.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hazel Blake. And now we'll have Tanisha Christopher with our questions from our live feed and social media as we wrap up now the question and answer segment.
Thank you again, Fiona. Now, our first 2 questions are related and they are for the Premier, so I'll ask them together. The first, are there additional packages or an increase to monthly allowances for persons on welfare who are now using more food, etc., given that their children are home all day? And the second one, can you expound on the assistance that would be provided to persons who do not have sufficient money in hand or credit cards to purchase essential items ahead of the 7-day lockdown? Premier?
Yeah, Tanisha, just repeat them again for me, please, so I have a clear.
Okay, so the first question, are there additional packages or an increase to monthly allowances for persons on welfare who are now using more food given that their children are home?
Yes, go ahead, next one.
The second, can you expound on any assistance that would be provided to persons who do not have sufficient money in hand or credit cards to purchase essential items ahead of the 7-day lockdown?
Okay, thank you very much. Those are very important questions as they affect the lives of individuals. Firstly, you're on welfare, and unless you have additional expenses, we didn't plan to increase the welfare. People on welfare are not part of this packet, but we understand that there are persons on welfare and they are home, and they may experience some additional burden. So the suggestion is, please call social welfare, and they will deal with you accordingly. Please. The numbers I will give, I think there's an open number, I think there's a cell number. And listen to Radio Montserrat, please, because that number will be given to you. I know people say to me, but we're locked down and they're not working, but we will provide you that number on Radio Montserrat so you can contact somebody, either through Facebook, WhatsApp, or telephone line. So that will be taken care of. The second question, assistance to provide for money or credit card. It's a difficult one. We are providing assistance to persons in some sectors now. The other persons will be dealt with. But if you fall in a position where you cannot provide food for the 7 days, please, the social services will help you. And if you don't get in touch with social services, give the Red Cross a call and they will contact somebody. Give them your address, your name, and they will find you. It's not an open invitation. I guess there are a few persons who might be hard hit. And yes, our intention is not to let anyone suffer. It is government intention to make sure that all of us come out through this thing together. And whatever we can do to help you, we will do it. So yes, you can call social services as well, and they will hear you and provide whatever assistance they can for you.
Okay, before I hand back over to Tanisha for her follow-up question, just to provide the numbers for the social services contact for persons who need support for meals, groceries, and other essential items. The numbers that you need to make a note of and call are 495-3895 or 495-7491. You can also call 491-3895 or 491-5307. Tanisha, over to you.
Okay, the other question is for Dr. Hazel Blake. There were reports that an individual who tested positive left the island. So this is a three-part question. Did the person leave the island before the results came back? After that individual was tested, were they placed under quarantine? And did the individual have permission to leave the island? I can repeat. So this question is about the reports that an individual who tested positive for COVID-19 left the island recently. The first part of the question asks, did the person leave the island before the results came back? After that individual was tested, were they placed under quarantine? And did the individual have permission to leave the island? Dr. Blake.
Okay, first things first, did the person leave before the results came back? The answer is yes. Was the person placed in quarantine? Like all other all other individuals, once a sample is taken, they are in quarantine pending the results of the test. But unfortunately, the system did not work exactly as it should have in that instance, and the individual departed the island prior to the results. I can hasten to add, having received the results, efforts were made to ensure that the individual was aware of their results, and as well as any other persons who may or may not have been put at risk were informed accordingly. And I think there was a third question. What was the third one, please?
The third question was if the individual had permission to leave the island.
Permission? No, but as I said, the system didn't work the way it should have. And so unfortunately, there was a failure in communication, I think is the best way of describing that. And so I do not want to simply put it blame on the individual and say the individual left without permission. I think the better answer is, and the truthful answer is that there was a breakdown in communication, and so that individual departed, having completed a 14-day quarantine, I should add. So as far as they were concerned, they could leave the island.
Thank you, Dr. Blake. And this is our final question from our YouTube channel. And we want to say thank you to the members of the public for submitting your questions this afternoon. And it's for the Minister of Agriculture. Vegetable farmers need to harvest their crops every 2 days. Has there been any consideration towards issuing permits to ensure that they can supply supermarkets?
Hi, good afternoon again. Thank you. We've already issued passes to, if not all, almost all of our farmers. We acknowledge the importance of food security, and we acknowledge that agriculture is probably 2 or 3 times easier to alleviate poverty than some of the other economic strategies. We will be in the future making sure that our farmers are able to harvest and distribute whatever crops they have in the fields. Certainly we cannot afford to allow them to lose these crops. So we have been working with them in every possible way to allow them to continue their practices. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Cranston Buffong. I'll now have final remarks from the Premier. Following that, we'll have final comments also from the Deputy Premier and from the Honorable Minister of Health, if he's still online, and from Minister Buffong. But first, Premier, your final comments.
Thank you very much, everyone. I want to thank the media for allowing us to disseminate this information to the wider public. Thank GIU and Radio Montserrat, of course, for carrying us and allowing the people to understand what we are doing. Let me repeat, and don't get tired of me saying it. The primary objective of any measures which this government put in place is to protect you, the people. I know at times some of the measures look are harsh, and some of us are going to suffer like hardship, but we are suffering for a while for the good of the for the greater good of all of us. And so the new measures that are in place are not being put in place because we want to do it. It's because we have to. We just want to make sure that we protect you and that we halt the spread of COVID-19 and that we put our people back to work as soon as possible. And so the whole idea of putting this measure in place from time to time, as I said before, is to reduce the risk, reduce the spread, flatten the curve, and put Montserrat back to normal very, very soon. And so I urge you that as we go through the next week, please respect the law. This order comes into force 12 o'clock Monday morning or midnight Sunday night, and it runs until the following Sunday, 12 midnight. Please, there will be no vehicles allowed on the road except emergency. No supermarkets or shops, nothing will be open except essential services. And don't leave your home. Exercise around your community, your local, walk around your streets and back. And don't associate with persons outside of your family. So if you're walking together, no more than 4, it's 4 of you. And you are expected to do that. The police and the defense force will be on duty. And they have one instruction: to enforce the order. And it sounds a bit harsh, but for me personally, this is crunch time. It's absolutely critical to break the chain of COVID and reduce the number of cases in Montserrat. And I will not compromise in doing that to protect the people of this country. Thank you very much. Have a blessed Easter, everyone.
Thank you, Premier. Now to the Deputy Premier, Dr. the Honorable Samuel Joseph.
Good day, everyone. And again, I would echo what the Premier says and thank everybody for tuning in. Thank everybody for listening. Thank the press for their questions and for all those that answered. And the Premier mentioned that people might get tired of him saying certain things, but if they get tired of him, they're going to get tired of me saying it also, because I'm going to say the same thing, that the primary focus of why we are doing what we're doing is to make sure that people are protected and are safe. And as Dr. Blake pointed out, the normal cycle of this is that every 2 days you see the doubling, and we have not been seeing it. Cross fingers, knock wood, and these things, because we are putting certain measures and it appears to be containing the spread of the virus. And what we're trying to do is to get it to go down, and as Malika pointed out, and what we're trying to get to is to get it to 0. So if we all work together, if we all understand why these measures are put in place, and we do the social distancing, we try to stay where we are and everybody try to comply, and we get this thing out, then we can start back our life. Because we know that at this present time, it's very hard for people. It's very hard for people who have lost their jobs, people with children, people who are not employed, the economy is collapsing, and things are hard out there. And we're working hard to put things in place to get you through this period, but we also need to get rid of the virus out of this country so that we can totally start back building back our country. So let's all work together and win this thing against this virus.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. Do we still have the Minister of Health online? I know he was having some technical difficulties earlier. Honorable Charles Kernan, are you with us still? It doesn't seem so. So I am going to ask the Minister of Agriculture, Honorable Cranston Buffong, for his remarks.
Thank you, Fiona. First, let me sympathize with everyone who have been suffering during these times. We need to continue to support each other going forward. COVID is a life and death situation, and as such, it's no joke. To our essential services, our farmers, our fisher folks, I thank you for your services so far. I encourage you to protect yourself at all costs, including the way you handle your food, in the way you handle your produce and everything. Practice your hygiene and practice your social distances. Let us not lose hope, people. Let us continue to work together in this situation. We are nowhere close to the end. We will overcome. All is not lost. Your government is doing everything in its power to help and to alleviate some of these stresses and problems that you're having during this crisis. And together we can and will come out of this in a better place at the end. And I thank you.
Right, thank you very much. And on that note, I want to thank the officials and the members of the media for joining us today for this press conference on Good Friday, not the normal Good Friday routine. So I thank you for, spending time with us here and clarifying all of the issues and questions around the new measures. Just a reminder that if we comply quickly, we can overcome this quickly as well. Thanks again. God bless.
Keeping Montserrat alive. This is 95.5, 88.3 FM, ZJB Radio.